Hi everyone! I have chosen to do my analysis on the Sequenza X by Luciano Berio. This piece is a modern work written for trumpet that has been increasingly picking up steam as it becomes a more standard part of the repertoire. It was written in 1984 for Thomas Stevens, the principal trumpet player in the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Luciano Berio began writing his sequenzas 26 years earlier, in 1958. Each sequenza is essentially a solo composition written for a different instrument. The word sequenza is Italian for sequence and refers to the fact that each piece was built from a sequence or harmonic fields from which the other strongly characterized musical functions were derived. Before 1984, Berio had composed 9 other sequenzas for instruments, including flute, harp, piano, trombone, violin, and even one for voice. But despite many requests, he still hadn't composed one for trumpet. Berio was finally convinced when his close friend, Ernest Fleischmann, the managing director of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, requested that a trumpet sequenza be written. It was commissioned in 1983 to be performed in April 1984 by Thomas Stevens. However, Stevens never received the score from Berio. When Stevens saw that he was to perform the sequenza in April, he asked Fleischmann to follow up with Berio, who eventually faxed the score over 2 weeks before the scheduled performance. Stevens only had 9 days with the full score before the sequenza's debut. Compared to those previously written, this sequenza is known for being very conventional in the sense that there are no special effects, just the natural trumpet the way it is, showing the wide range of techniques that are possible on the instrument. In Berio's words, a musical instrument is itself a piece of musical language. So with that, let's explore the language of Berio's Sequenza X for trumpet. I've chosen to focus on analyzing 4 different techniques used in this piece: flutter tonguing, doodle tonguing, valve tremolo, and stung notes. First, flutter tonguing. This technique is performed by rapidly fluttering the tongue while playing a note, as if trying to roll your R's very fast. It is a more aggressive style of tonguing and portrays a feeling of agitation or intensity. It is indicated by the letters FL above the note to be fluttered, with 3 dashes through the stem, as you can see here. Starting in the 4th system on the fortissimo F sharp. The second technique is the doodle tongue, which is done by essentially saying the word doodle while sounding a pitch. Each of the hard D consonants cause the note to be rearticulated. This technique is less aggressive and more legato than the flutter tonguing. The doodle tongue is indicated by a DL above the note, as you can see here, also with 3 dashes in the stem. So starting in the 3rd system on the fortissimo F natural. You can hear how this is a much more delicate technique than the flutter tongue. The third technique, the valve tremolo, is done by altering between 2 different fingerings to produce the same pitch. Sometimes the fingerings to be used are shown above the note, as you can see down here on page 2. This indicates that this tremolo is done by alternating between pressing down valves 1 and 2 and by pressing down all 3. So starting in the last system on the first page, listen for the valve tremolo at the end of the system here. You can hear how this technique has more of a trill-like feel to it, as it is also less aggressive than the flutter tonguing that surrounds it. The final technique isn't a technique for the trumpet per se, but involves the use of a piano, the only other instrument used in this sequence. The technique takes advantage of the piano's ability to resonate. Certain notes are played on the trumpet into the piano's resonator box, and made to sympathetically vibrate with the strings. At times, the pianist will press down pedals and keys without sounding the pitches in order to produce a unique resonance. These notes intended to resonate are referred to as stung notes and are notated with an arrow above and pointing down at the note to be stung, as you can see here and here and here, for example. So listen for the piano resonating after the stung notes. We'll start at the beginning. Because Berlioz sequenzas are built on harmonic fields, I've chosen to look at each technique separately and analyze the harmonic motives that can be found within the technique. So starting with flutter tonguing, as we look at the pitches that are fluttered, we get an F, a D, an F sharp, a G natural, and finally a C sharp. Now as we look at these different pitches, we can spell them to actually make a G, a G dominant chord. The G sharp, the C sharp, and the F sharp are just neighbor tones. This dominant chord, which we generally associate with the 5 chord in a diatonic mode, could have relation to the intervals of a perfect fifth, as well as rhythmic motives that we will look at later. Another way these pitches could be spelled is a C sharp major 7 chord. F is just the same as an E sharp, G sharp, C, and D. C sharp, major 7, flat 9. The motives in the doodle tonguing were a bit different. We start on an F natural right here. And then we go to G natural the next time we see it, and then a G sharp. This ascension is distinct from the jumps that we saw with the flutter tonguing. Perhaps as a teaser for what's coming next, these ascending doodle tonguing notes directly precede the first extensive run that we see in the piece, this 9-tuplet figure here. It's slurred the first time, and then an almost identical motive is played in the next system using the doodle tonguing technique, solidifying the structure of this idea. The valve tremolos, as we move from one to the other, don't necessarily spell out any chords or have an ascending pattern, but we can characterize them by their intervallic relationships. For example, the first pitch to employ this technique is this G sharp. We then see it on a C natural, then on a C sharp, and finally down on a G natural. Berlioz's use of these half steps can emphasize the perfect fifth as well as the tritone, both of which are used throughout the piece. Berlioz's use of rhythmic groupings cannot be overlooked when analyzing this work. We see many groups of 3 and 5 to start out the piece, mainly here. You get a group of 5 here, many triplets here, as you can see throughout the first page. The first page mainly consists of triplets, and when we get into the second page, we see more of the quintuplet figures, as you can see here. I thought it was interesting that he also starts out the piece on a minor third, from this D to this F natural. And as we saw earlier, the perfect fifth relationships. The connection between the use of thirds and triplets and perfect fifths and quintuplets may be coincidence, but either way, I believe it's still noteworthy. Another interesting relationship I found between the grouping of notes and the intervals used is in the first 9-tuplet figure we see on the first page here. The run starts on a D below the staff and ends on an E on the top line, the top space. Spelled out, this is a major ninth. Again, it's hard to know if these two uses of the number 9 at the same time was Berrios' intention or simply the way it worked out. A similar example of this is near the bottom of the second page. Here as we start on B and go up to C, again spelling a major ninth. Another aspect of the sequenza we can analyze is the idea of tonal centers. Although the piece is atonal, there are areas where a certain pitch is stressed more than others, making it feel like the center pitch or tone. For example, the beginning of the piece starts with an obvious emphasis on F, it being the most repeated of just 2 pitches played on this first line. And although we travel to other pitch areas, we always come back to the F, most notably in systems 3 and 4, as well as the last 2 systems on the first page. On page 2, we move to the tonal center of C sharp. This time we get a unique emphasis on the pitch with a constant valve tremolo, and then later on we get punched other notes, but it's all coming back to this C sharp here. Even without listening to, we can see how many C sharps are on this page, but let's have a listen anyway. On the third page, about halfway down, we start seeing a lot of E flats, starting right here. This is also one of the most lyrical tonal sounding sections, and there are brief moments when we can hear it in the key of E flat, especially on this quasi 5-1 cadence here. Let's have a listen. On page 4, we move from E flat up to G natural. You see lots of G naturals here on this page. Notice how we've been ascending in the tonal center. It went up from F, up to C sharp, to E flat, and now to G. By the end of page 5, we are unmistakably playing around a C natural. You can see here, 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 here. From the end of the page 5 to the beginning of page 6, the C is stung 7 times in a row, more than any other pitch we have heard up until this point. This is indicative of the climax of the piece. About halfway down the last page, we get one more F as a stung pitch here, reminding us of the tonal center we started on. Shortly after the F is introduced again, the excitement begins to calm down, and we begin winding down to the end of the piece. Berio also chooses to end this piece on F, original tonal center, offering some sense of closure as we finish the trumpet sequenza 10. So there you have it. We have taken apart one of Berio's difficult works and made some sense of it. We now understand better the meaning of the title sequenza, as we have looked at both rhythmic as well as harmonic sequences that Berio uses throughout the piece. Knowing where and how to look for these sequences gives us some feeling of direction amid the seeming chaos of extended technique and atonality. I hope this screencast has given you some ideas on how you can analyze a piece of music that is considered atonal or avant-garde, and I hope you enjoyed it.